And we're back to sum up Chapter 1, Section 5, Social Variation in the Age of Agriculture. Let's start with pastoral societies. Some regions relied more heavily on animals because farming was difficult or impossible. The land was just unsuitable for farming. And those environmental factors would include places like the Arctic tundra, deserts, and even some grasslands are generally not favorable to settled agriculture. They were good for animal husbandry or the domestication of animals, and those became known as pastoral societies. And these pastoral nomads, first emerged in Central Asia, the Arabian Peninsula, the Sahara Desert, as well as parts of Eastern and Southern Africa. They used the milk, meat, and even the blood from these animals. These became central to the diet of these communities. And they relied on different animals in different regions. For example, horses were domesticated by 4000 BCE. And this was encouraged by those nomads in Central Asia. And this really helped induce the spread of the pastoral peoples along the Central Asian steppes. And domesticated camels in the desert areas allowed humans to actually penetrate into the inner areas of the Asian, Arabian, and Saharan deserts. These pastoral nomads were very mobile. They moved about with their animals, looking for seasonally appropriate and unexploited grazing lands. But there was some conflict with the agricultural areas, the settled communities, and that age-old conflict existed between the wealthier, more settled communities and the nomadic herders, with the mobile yet poorer communities that wanted the wealth and the diverse products of those villages, towns, or even cities. Now, there were no pastoral societies that emerged in the Americas. But going back to that conflict between the pastoral societies and the settled communities, this relationship between these herders and their farming neighbors, it's been a very important and enduring theme in Afro-Eurasian history. And notice that includes Africa, Europe, and Asia, 3 continents. Okay, so this conflict between the nomadic herders and the farmers has been going on for thousands and thousands of millennia, of years. Several millennia, that's the right word. Like I said, those pastoralists wanted access to the agricultural products. And, of course, they even competed for land with the settled communities, as the farmers wanted to grow crops, and the pastoralists wanted to use that land for grazing for their animals. But there's also a peaceful exchange between these groups. Technology, ideas, products, peoples. There's a lot of interaction and exchange between these people in the Afro-Eurasian area. And in those pastoral societies, there's a relatively equal a social quality between men and women that really persisted. And, you know, that social equality, those ties to the social patterns of hunting and gathering communities really continued in communities that did without the formal state systems. And that's because they didn't have kings and chiefs and bureaucrats and aristocrats. Women, despite men and women, I mean, they were equal, they had different roles and different responsibilities. they were equal. Women were primarily in charge of milking animals, processing that milk, making textiles. Some did participate in battle. And the men were responsible for hunting, other major duties that had to do with some of the larger animals. And of course, that was the majority that participated in battle. Now, there are some characteristic forms of these agricultural societies like Vanpo or Jericho. And, there's the maintenance of equality and freedom. Like I said, they didn't have kings or chiefs, bureaucrats, aristocrats. Bureaucrats would be high-ranking officials, government officials, people like that. Now, we've talked about Kalahuyuk before in southeastern Turkey, southern Turkey. Population of several thousands. They buried their dead under their houses. And they actually didn't have any streets. The people moved around on rooftops. And part of that was because they didn't have any doors. Of course, hinge technology didn't really exist back then, right? Something that can move on a hinge like a door. So they didn't have doors. In addition, it also kept out predators or invaders, and if there were any issues with flooding. So they just moved around on the rooftops, and there were holes on the rooftops or very, very high windows, and a little, a crude form of a staircase or a ladder, really, for them to go up and down on. And they had these big, huge homes that were really consisted of just one main room, really, for everyone. And then they'd have a little storage room where they kept their surplus items. But with this settled community, they were able to develop certain crafts and arts amongst different groups. And there was little signs of inherited male-female dominance. Sorry, in case you hadn't noticed, we're an agricultural village society. Now, in horticultural villages, women are relatively equal to men. Their roles were in farming and weaving. Some villages even use matrilineal family lines. Now, of course, others use patrilineal lines of heritage and lineages, but some use matrilineal, which means they follow the mother side. In Europe and China, there's definitely an evidence of a preference for male children. And these village-based agricultural societies flourished well into the 19th century. They're organized by kinship or lineage groups, right? They're tribesmen, clansmen, things like that. And this lineage system, for them, performed the functions of what a government would do. Even well into the 11 and 1200s with the Mongols, and the little side note there, with their tribes and how that functioned like a government. They had very modest levels of social inequality. The elders sometimes sought to exploit the labor of the younger members and even control women's reproductive powers. And there were some title societies that brought prestige, but they weren't exactly hereditary. So, title, didn't necessarily mean it was hereditary, but there was prestige that went along with that. And so without a formal state system or government system, those especially the extended family ties, that really linked people together. And that's how those elders were able to exploit or really exercise their authority over some of the younger members. And that could provide opportunity for them to abuse their power. And like I was talking about, with women and, their importance in farming and even the textile work, that gave them some social importance for sure. Alright, chiefdoms. Okay. Chiefs, which are different than kings, usually rely on generosity, ritual status, or even charisma to govern or to rule, not necessarily force. And so, not force, but with gifts. And like I said, the rituals and that, and their charisma, how they could interact with people, that's how they got their power. And so it wasn't from physical force or violence, it was by giving gifts, performing religious or political rituals. How charismatic they were. And these emerged in Mesopotamia sometime after 6000 BCE. The religious and, they had religious and secular authority, right? The chiefs combined the sacred and the political. And anthropologists have studied some recent chiefdoms in the Pacific Islands. And these chiefdoms are just a little bit different. Similar, just a little bit different. They usually claim descent from the first son of some imagined ancestor. And they also fulfilled a secular or political, non-religious, and religious role. So they combined the non-religious and the religious decision-making. They collected tribute, right? They received gifts. They even redistributed it to the privileged groups. And they, they're kept part of the tribute to sustain or maintain their status. And sometimes the tribute could include food or even some, I don't want to say manufactured, but some other created items or crafted items from the commoners. There were other chiefdoms in other parts of the world, not just Mesopotamia or the Pacific Islands, but there's one known as Cahokia, and it looks like I misspelled that. That's actually Cahohkia. It's Cahohkia. Cahokia. And that emerged in North America. And so, you really have to put this into perspective. The agricultural revolution, which dramatically changed the way humans lived, many humans. By doing so, it transformed the trajectory of the human journey and evolution of life on Earth. We were headed down one path and took a different turn. Some couple of major changes. Humans began to dominate nature. Before, with those pastoral societies and those nomadic hunter-gatherers, they were just in survival mode, adjusting to their environment and using their environment. Now, with agriculture, humans aren't just using the environment, they're dominating the environment. They're dominating nature. And that led to some people even, increasingly, some people even dominating other people. And so, hopefully you understand how, even though it was a very long time ago and it's a simple idea, that transition from hunting and gathering to farming, but it completely changed human history and who we are and what we became, because so many things about our lives were changed. Like I said, it was a dramatic transition. And so let's look at, let's reflect on what we learned there. And this is about the uses of the Paleolithic era, or the Old Stone Age. The study of history is about those who tell it today, not just about the past. The views of the past reflect our own, disillusionment. The Paleolithic era is sometimes regarded as a golden age, really. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but they're admired by feminists, environmentalists, anti-materialists. So, is there really progress? Some might point that these changes, is it a sign of life getting better? Scholars have looked to the Paleolithic era in questioning the explosion of population and economic growth from the recent past. Gathering and hunting peoples of today have looked to the Paleolithic era in an effort to maintain or even recover their identities. And those Paleolithic values, others might find aspects of early human life as a model or even lesson for contemporary societies. And so, and the objectivity here is it condemning or romanticizing a historical era that violate the historian's need to be objective? Some very important things about, what have we lost in the mad rush to become more modern? No one can be completely detached when studying the past, but, if you condemn or romanticize the historical area, how is that, how really think, are they being too subjective, right? So being objective is the key. So just a couple things to think about. Okay. Man, this picture is super cool. This is some cave art, in case you couldn't tell. But it's some cave art. I believe I think this is maybe this image looks like maybe a kill or something. You have three separate figures. This looks to be like the human and maybe two animals. Maybe even a bird right here. These big long sticks could have been weapons. Maybe this is one weapon that was broken. But it does look like this animal is kind of standing over the person. But this, this could be the head and this could be the tail. I'm not sure. But it's a very interesting image. And it does provide some information about the Paleolithic life, from this rock art. Obviously hunting played a very important part of these societies, even to the types of animals they hunted, maybe the strategies and weapons that were used by the hunters. And this one indicates maybe some danger as long as hunting. Okay. This one, I thought this was pretty interesting. Obviously, this is female. You can see the two animals at the side. I don't know if this is some kind of a hat or a head ornament that she's wearing right back here. She's a big girl, though. I don't know. She might be pregnant. But this is another interesting picture of this Paleolithic art. And here's a painting that I think is pretty neat. He's got tools he's carrying around with him. Some very, based on the painting, obviously it's the artist's rendition of what it might have been like. But these tools seem very advanced for the time, as well as how the clothes were made. But and this is probably a weapon right here. But it looks like he's going on a hunt. He's got some kind of an axe or something over here. And this might have a big, spear on the end of it. Oh, this is great. This is good stuff right here. Oh shoot, I don't, can I remember her name? Is this I think this is the Iceman. I gotta double check. I completely forgot. But, how cool is that? I mean, this thing is this skeleton is thousands of years old, and look how well it was preserved. I mean, that is incredible. And so we can learn a whole lot of information by studying this skeleton. I mean, humans have been able to, but that's just amazing. And they could probably even determine maybe how he died. But gosh, it even looks like there's still some tissue left. And I think this was the might have been preserved in something naturally, of course. And Stonehenge. Oh man, this is great. This is a aerial photograph of Stonehenge. I mean, how did they move stones this large, this heavy, into what looks like was some type of a pattern that held some type of importance? Right? Now, what are the major features here? Now think about some things. What are some things that come to mind? The overall structure looks like at one point it was maybe 2 circles, an inner circle and an outer circle. In this construction of large stones. What's the sequence between, the standing stones here? And the ones that go on top. What's the sequence of that? Who's balancing on the others? What's the difference? What does it mean that some stones are no longer standing? Are those down on purpose? Or is that from nature? Those are really heavy, and it's hard for those that just get knocked over by wind. So, were they not ever standing to begin with? What about even some of the stones that are outside the circle? Is there a significance for that? What was this site used for? Is this part of a larger structure that's just kind of whittled away over thousands of years? That have just disappeared? I don't know. That is chapter 1, First Peoples, First Farmers. That's actually most of history in a single chapter. I hope that you learned a lot. And I will see you for chapter 2, First Civilization.